Black CEO Anthony Caldwell always understood that success required a combination of tenacity, perseverance, and a pinch, or maybe a bucketful, of luck. However, no one could have guessed that on one seemingly regular morning at the famous Halion Tech headquarters, everything would shift in ways so astonishing that it felt as if fate had planned a big scheme. As the first rays of sunlight filtered into the towering glass structure, Anthony entered the foyer with the peaceful confidence of a man who had survived many storms. It was a cold spring day, and the early hours were alive with energy, the murmur of private discussions, and the subtle shuffle of business in progress. However, beneath the polished exterior of the company's forward-thinking facade, something incredible was about to happen, one that would forever change Anthony's life, the company's fate, and even the hearts of those who believed in a future of true equality. Anthony's journey was not easy. Born in a modest area with goals too big for his surroundings, he created his own world of potential through pure drive and a never-ending pursuit of knowledge. Graduating at the top of his class, he gained access to some of the most renowned corporate circles, where he immediately earned respect for his unshakable view that leadership was about boosting others rather than controlling them. Over the years, he had broken numerous glass ceilings and challenged preconceptions, forging ahead in an industry that all too frequently ignored voices like his. At Halion Tech, he was tasked with leading not only a company, but also a vision, the belief that technology, driven by compassion and authenticity, has the potential to alter the world. That morning, however, his routine was interrupted before he could even welcome his crew. When he entered the lobby, he was met with a contemptuous glare from the receptionist, a newcomer to the company, a stern-faced woman with a clipped tone in her speech. In a quick exchange that lasted only a few heartbeats, she told him clearly, "Get lost," as if such a terse dismissal was an invitation for him to abandon everything he had achieved. The statement shocked him, serving as a visceral reminder that bigotry never fully died in the silent shadows of contemporary corporate America. Though Anthony had anticipated minor undercurrents of bias throughout his career, this unexpected clash from someone whose function it was to greet tourists filled him with regret and resolve. For the next few minutes, Anthony stood still, staring at the words as if they were a challenge laid at his feet. The receptionist's icy tone irritated him, but it also sparked something deep within him, a desire to rise above the pettiness that had infiltrated the institution he now oversaw. In that brief instant, the seeds were set for a more dramatic revolution than anyone could have predicted. Anthony turned away calmly, his mind churning with ideas of reconciliation and contemplation. He determined to face the coming day with the dignity and elegance of an unwavering leader, bent on identifying the source of such negativity before it corroded the spirit of the company he valued. But as the morning went, the repercussions of that early interaction began to appear in ways that were neither predictable nor wholly controllable. Meetings that had been precisely organized on his calendar took on a tense aspect, with board members moving uneasily and murmurs of displeasure permeating the corridors. The personnel, who had previously been so united in their common vision for growth, suddenly found themselves uncomfortable, questioning the roots of trust that had always defined Halion Tech. The receptionist's fleeting glare and chilly greeting became, in hushed whispers across cubicles and clinking water-cooler chats, a symbol of a deeper malaise, a mismatch between the company's aspirations and the reality of internal conflict. Anthony spent the next few hours reflecting deeply on the events that were unfolding around him. Instead of dismissing the occurrence as a one-time act of disrespect, he chose to see it as a probable indicator of something far more systemic, a resounding echo of the issues that existed even in a modern organization. After all, he had always felt that every setback was an opportunity to challenge the status quo and promote internal rejuvenation. His thoughts moved to the various faces of injustice he had seen on his way up, as well as his firm belief that the struggle for equality was never an end in itself, but rather a continual journey marked by personal and social challenges. By mid-afternoon, Anthony had gathered his top management for an emergency meeting. In the boardroom, surrounded by nervous faces, he talked calmly and confidently, belying the fury raging within him. "Today, we have been challenged by a moment that forces us to confront who we are and what we stand for," he stated, his voice firm and uncompromising. We are a corporation founded on the promise of innovation and transformation, not just in technology but also in the hearts and minds of our employees. We cannot allow a single event to define us. Instead, we must learn from it, heal the pain it has revealed, and guarantee that our future acts pave the way for true inclusion. His comments, eloquent yet strong, echoed around the room. Some attendees nodded in accord, their eyes reflecting shared memories of battles fought in boardrooms, on the streets, and within themselves, a mix of pride and contemplation that was both freeing and sobering. As the conversation progressed, it became evident that the receptionist's callous dismissal was more than just an act of rudeness. It was a symptom of a larger, more prevalent problem that had quietly festered within the company's hallways. For some, it brought back memories of old grievances, prejudice, or feeling like an outsider in the so-called family of contemporary enterprise. As voices began to overlap in lively conversation, Anthony listened closely, determined to be the catalyst for an honest reckoning with the company's inherited and evolving ideals. As the day progressed into the early evening, an unexpected turn of events began to reverberate throughout the room and into Halion-Tekka's future. Minutes after Anthony's impassioned call, an urgent message arrived on his personal phone, a meticulously drafted notice indicating that the board of directors, having met behind closed doors earlier that day, had reached a declaration that would call his leadership into question. The memo reads like a betrayal in slow motion. It revealed concerns raised by a faction on the board who questioned not only Anthony's recent reaction but also his long-term strategic decisions, accusations that, while carefully veiled in corporate jargon, cut to the heart of his authority and legacy. Anthony was briefly caught up in a frenzy of bewilderment and outrage. Here he stood, a man whose entire life had been dedicated to breaking down boundaries and uniting opposing viewpoints, confronting what appeared to be a fitting conclusion to the day's earlier outrage. The board members, in their restrained and deliberate style, had picked this moment to express their misgivings and signify a departure from his leadership. But as Anthony processed the letter's ramifications, his mind tunneled back to that initial slight, the simple but profound message to get lost, and realized with clarity that every incident in his journey, no matter how painful, contained an intrinsic truth: to love and lead is to face adversity without giving up. His legacy was defined not by the times when others attempted to control his fate, but by how he turned those occasions into strong acts of rebellion against the forces attempting to marginalize him. In the quiet intensity of his own study that night, Anthony deliberated about his alternatives. The board's memo had fanned a flame of despair, but Anthony saw it as a catalyst for a groundbreaking concept. Instead of giving in to the board's demands or retreating into the safety of conformity, he took a radical choice that would shake the business world to its core: he would shut down the entire organization. And not just out of rage, but as a siren call, a declaration that the disparities and hidden biases ingrained into the institution could no longer be allowed. His decision was not a resignation to failure, but rather an opportunity to rebuild from the ground up, ensuring that the promise of equality became more than just a slogan in the future. The announcement of Halion-Tekka's shutdown spread like wildfire. The statement elicited a wide range of reactions, from horror to adulation, in boardrooms, newsrooms, and on social media. At first, there was outrage. Shareholders grieved the abrupt closing of a company in which they had invested, and former employees were concerned about the uncertain future of their jobs. However, the story altered as more details surfaced. Anthony's message was as unequivocal as it was passionate: this was no ordinary corporate maneuver, but a well-organized act of revolution. He delivered a statement detailing the sad history of microaggressions, outright dismissals, and a culture that had silently failed to maintain the principles of inclusivity and respect. In that declaration, he spoke kindly but firmly about the need to shift away from a system that prioritized business over people, control over compassion. In the days following the shutdown, the city's media was filled with debates, opinion articles, and heated arguments. News presenters reported with measured surprise how a single morning confrontation, a receptionist's abrupt dismissal, had snowballed into an act that echoed across the halls of power. Analysts and business gurus attempted to solve the enigma of internal turmoil at Halion-Tekka by speculating on the silent undercurrents of company politics and institutional bias. Nonetheless, despite the swirling conflicts, a new narrative began to emerge, one that glorified the daring required to challenge the old order in favor of a more humane, egalitarian society. Anthony Caldwell emerged not as a discredited leader or an impetuous disruptor, but as a pathfinder who challenged the basic foundation of current corporate hierarchy. During a series of public interviews following his dramatic declaration, Anthony discussed the lengthy road that had led to that fateful morning in the lobby. He described in measured detail his personal experiences of being misjudged, dealing with ignorance, and having both supporters and foes try to box him into a preset narrative. "There is nothing more powerful," he stated in one interview, "than the willingness to stand up, confront prejudices, and build bridges where there were previously only walls. Today marks the end of an era, but it also heralds the start of a new journey, a journey defined by the hope and resilience of the human spirit rather than old power structures." Those words reverberated across the country, sparking conversations in boardrooms, community centers, and even classrooms as people grappled with the revelations of what had truly been hidden behind polished exteriors and corporate jargon. In the weeks that followed, while the legal and logistical issues of winding down a Fortune 500 business unfolded, a silent revolution began. Former HalionTech employees found themselves at a crossroads, with many feeling the sting of violated trust, while others, inspired by Anthony's brave stand, saw an opportunity to impact change in industries that had long been ossified by obsolete notions. Universities hosted panels on leadership and social justice, and grassroots groups emerged to investigate systemic faults in companies that claimed modernity as their trademark. Meanwhile, Anthony withdrew from the public glare, entering a period of serious meditation. In the serene isolation of a cottage in the woods he had visited as a boy, where ideas had first given shape and every ripple in the adjacent lake told a story of renewal, he began making plans for the future. He envisioned an enterprise founded not on weak profit margins and quarterly earnings, but on the enduring pillars of fairness, human dignity, and genuine innovation. Over long, meditative walks through sunlit forests, he pondered ideas for reimagining corporate culture, a template in which diversity was woven into every decision, strategy, line of code, and conversation. Many had criticized HalionTech's shutdown as premature and irresponsible, but Anthony saw it as simply a transitory stop, a necessary cleansing rite. Sometimes, he reflected during one now iconic interview, to build something truly magnificent, you must first dismantle the old structures that no longer serve the purpose of unity and progress. At the same time, the internal workings of HalionTech were not overlooked. An extensive investigation was initiated into the facts surrounding the receptionist's unexpected comment that fateful morning. While some criticized it as an isolated incident, the investigation finally revealed a worrying pattern of unresolved grievances, as well as a culture that had mistakenly fostered a sense of entitlement among some while restricting a margin for error among others. Long-term employees' testimonies revealed subtle dismissals, microaggressions, and interpersonal disputes that had been simmering beneath the surface of corporate politeness. The probe became a rallying cry for reform, both within the corporation and among many other organizations scurrying to assess their own cultures in the aftermath of HalionTech's spectacular turn of events. In the subsequent public hearings, experts discussed the harmful effects of hazardous employment conditions. Social scientists disputed how deeply ingrained ideas inside corporate structures frequently resulted in systemic prejudices that could spiral out of control. The chairman of one well-known human resources institute suggested that the receptionist's casual remark was less of a spontaneous outburst and more of an unavoidable eruption from a reservoir of unsaid discontent, a microcosm of many similar disputes that were never dared to be spoken publicly. As the hearings progressed, it became evident that Anthony Caldwell's decision to close the company, while contentious, was also a much-needed wake-up call for a sector that is too often disguised behind crafted success stories and polished public images. Despite all of these debates and discussions, Anthony's personal journey of introspection persisted. He spent endless hours, both alone and with close confidants, documenting the progress of his ideas in a series of introspective writings. These essays would eventually be combined into a fundamental book on leadership, telling stories of personal tragedy and success, the painful demolition of structures and the exciting emergence of new possibilities. In these pages, he explored the contradictions of power and vulnerability, providing real, unfiltered observations that question conventional thought. He wrote on how the receptionist's brusque instruction to get lost had become, strangely, a metaphor for letting go of the things that were holding him back. Rather than concede defeat, he opted to disrupt, to demolish an old order that had discreetly catered to biases, and to communicate that leadership was ultimately about transformation, often painful, but always hopeful. As the months passed into a year, the public began to see the benefits of Anthony's audacious ambition materialize. What began as the abrupt closure of a corporate institution evolved into the birth of a completely new movement. Former partners reunited, and executives from several industries joined forces with a common goal: to rethink the rules of engagement. Town hall gatherings, formerly suffocated by corporate jargon and hierarchical divides, have evolved into vibrant forums of ideas in which every voice, regardless of background or origin, is given the opportunity to contribute. New enterprises emerged, formed by those who had previously struggled under the weight of conformity. They followed the key concepts that Anthony had long advocated in every forum and business memo: a commitment to embracing diversity not as a checkbox, but as a continuous, changing practice. In one particularly moving town hall meeting held in a newly refurbished community facility in downtown, a young entrepreneur described the aftermath of that fateful day at Haley & Tech. When Anthony Caldwell chose to shut everything down, many of us felt an overwhelming surge of liberation. It felt as if all of our whispered grievances and hopes for change had exploded into a movement that would shape our destiny. We are no longer limited by old assumptions. We are free to create something that genuinely embodies the ideals of our communities. That message, which echoed through numerous civic hallways, sparked a collective consciousness that cut across industry lines. Back in his retreat, Anthony planned a series of public talks aimed not at persuading naysayers or calming investors, but at encouraging a thorough, honest discussion about the problems of leading in a world that frequently avoided looking in the mirror. One such speech, given at an international summit on ethical leadership, was the talk of the conference circuit. Anthony recalled the events of that frigid morning in a controlled tone, emphasizing that every rejection and insult was a call to action rather than an excuse to retreat. We must transform our pain into power, our isolation into solidarity, he insisted, his remarks both personal and universal. In the years after, his talks and writings have encouraged thousands of people, both employees and executives, to review their own workplaces with a fresh dedication to transparency, empathy, and radical transformation. However, as with any revolution, there were others who clung to the remnants of the previous order. A group of traditional executives, who believe that corporate institutions should be impenetrable to emotional or ideological intrusions, continued to regard Anthony's activities as foolish and hazardous. They contended that an act as significant as destroying a huge corporation may start off a chain reaction of instability and unpredictability. In a series of intense debates on premium financial news networks, pundits questioned whether one man's vision could be justified as a complete rejection of existing conventions. They cited the resulting chaos, stock market volatility, employees' uncertain futures, and the company's legal limbo, as evidence of an insurgency that challenged the very fabric of corporate stability. Even as skeptics lamented the upheaval, a growing body of research began to validate Anthony's core premise: that long-term and resilient success could only be achieved by creating environments in which everyone, regardless of gender, race, or background, had the opportunity to shine. Well-known business schools, who were once bastions of traditional tactics, began to incorporate lessons from Haley & Tech's brief but transformational existence into their curriculum. Case studies demonstrated how, while unpleasant in the short term, the shutdown cleared the way for a new era of leadership models that rejected top-down hierarchies in favor of collaborative, community-based structures. As the story of Haley & Tech's closing days spread worldwide, an air of unsure optimism began to replace the previous acrimony. Innovators convened symposiums to create new forums for sharing ideas and forming unexpected alliances. Communities used the disruption as a wake-up call to deconstruct other outmoded institutions and form support networks that crossed corporate boundaries. In one particularly moving scene captured on live television, a panel of former Halion Tech employees, now leaders in their own right, expressed their emotions about how that single act of defiance had reshaped not only their understanding of leadership, but also their vision of what a true community could look like. When we see a person of color, someone who has faced every imaginable obstacle, choose to stand tall in the face of systemic injustice, it ignites a spark in all of us, according to a panelist. It challenges us to examine our hearts, our priorities, and the very structures that we once thought were unchangeable. Anthony's decision to close the company resulted in remarkable transformation over time, a live example to the power of vulnerability, resilience, and imaginative action in the face of adversity. His personal path, defined by loss, hardship, and, finally, catharsis, became intertwined with the collective narrative of a generation yearning for transformation. Even as his personal tale unfolded in unexpected ways, Anthony never lost sight of the concept that had guided him since the beginning: true leadership necessitates the humility to learn from every wound and the bravery to turn suffering into development. As the calendar marked the one-year anniversary of that amazing day, a large mosaic of stories developed, each interwoven with themes of hope, solidarity, and renewal. Former board members who had once sat in sterile meeting rooms now found themselves engaging in spirited dialogues with communities. Former colleagues who had been lost in the labyrinth of corporate protocols discovered in themselves a renewed passion for authenticity, and even the receptionist, the very catalyst of the initial spark, underwent a profound personal transformation after coming to terms with the role she had unknowingly played in a larger system that had too long, she expressed tremendous remorse in a series of private discussions before making a public confession aired to millions, admitting that her acts were symptomatic of a flawed system rather than a reflection of her own character. "I was educated to follow a script," she recalled bitterly in one television interview, "a script that dismisses some words and gestures as insignificant, even when they can destroy lives. I am sorry, and I now understand that true respect entails listening, learning, and growing on a daily basis." Her vulnerability and willingness to accept responsibility became emblematic of a society finally ready to confront its own flaws and work together to bridge the gaps left by the past. In the months that followed, as Anthony's revolutionary ideas took root in communities and new organizations emerged from the rich ground of reimagined possibilities, his journey served as a source of contemplation for future generations. Scholars would regard his actions as a watershed point in business history, a time when a leader chose to reveal the system's flaws and ask all stakeholders to assist rebuild a more equitable paradigm. His writings would become required reading for anybody seeking to comprehend the complicated interaction of power, identity, and the human need for dignity. In one final act of symbolic closure, Anthony planned a large gathering on the grounds of what used to be Halion Tech's corporate facility. Former employees, community leaders, and even some of the most outspoken detractors flocked to the wide lawns for a day of reflection and rejuvenation. There were emotional moments of quiet as people offered their personal reflections, stories of struggle, times when hope seemed lost, and the eternal power that comes from being true to oneself. In a touching speech made among centuries-old oak trees, Anthony recalled the chaos of that first day, acknowledging the sorrow while emphasizing that every adversity had acted as a spark for a more compassionate future. "We may have shut down a firm," he continued softly, "but today we have opened the door to a world that values every human life. Although the road ahead may be difficult, every one of you possesses the potential to change the course of history, power derived not from riches or prestige, but from empathy, tenacity, and an unwavering hope that together we can create a better tomorrow." As evening set on that momentous day, the air was filled with a positive energy, a sense that the wounds of the past were beginning to heal, clearing the way for a revival of the human spirit. The metamorphosis, which appeared to begin with a single stern instruction, eventually grew into a wider collective awakening. Anthony Caldwell's tale, from humble origins to meteoric ascent as a corporate giant, and finally to his bold act of opposing the status quo, continues to inspire anybody who dares to confront norms and dream of a fairer, more inclusive world. As the last embers of the day's light faded into the twilight of reflection, the legacy of Halion Tech, and its visionary leader, was enshrined in the hearts of those who believe that change, no matter how painful, is never the end, but rather a necessary prelude to a future defined by compassion, innovation, and common humanity. In the quiet hours that followed, as people gradually withdrew and the echo of that tragic morning remained in the halls of memory, it was evident that the story was far from ended. The reverberations of one person's steadfast stand continued to reverberate, inspiring countless more to pursue a society in which every voice is heard, every heart is respected, and the courage to deconstruct what is unjust opens the path for long-term change. In the years after, new initiatives have evolved, filled with the spirit of Anthony's unwavering pursuit for true transformation. Communities that had been split by adversity came together in surprising coalitions of purpose. Underground networks of inventors and social reformers met at conventions, with each meeting providing an opportunity to impart wisdom gained through upheaval. Across the country, in boardrooms and back alleys alike, the conversation switched from the ruins of a failed system to the exhilarating prospect of transformation, a future in which old criteria of success are constantly rewritten to include compassion, innovation, and social growth. Throughout his senior years, Anthony remained a steadfast mentor to those who sought his advice on forging their own paths. His participation at community activities was characterized by gentle encouragement, and his remarks served as a reminder that every hardship contains the germ of rebirth. At one memorable meeting in an old factory district where art installations recalled regular people's struggles, he listened quietly as a group of young dreamers described a vision of a society in which the wounds of earlier conflicts had become marks of honor and knowledge. "Remember," he said with a warm look in his eyes, "it is not the difficulties we face that define us, but the decisions we make in the aftermath. Every ending carries the undeniable promise of a new beginning." So, as Halion Tech's legacy was gradually woven into the larger tapestry of corporate and social evolution, the story of that unforgettable day, a day when a black CEO was told to "get lost" by a receptionist, only to later shut down an entire company, became enshrined as a watershed moment in a generation's narrative. It served as a reminder that, even when confronted with obvious injustice and systematic failure, the human spirit's ability for resilience and reimagination is limitless. Every whispered, "get lost," and dismissive gesture, no matter how painful, eventually served as fuel for the transforming fire that still burns bright in the hearts of all who dare to remake the world. As the decades passed, the ramifications of that single act of resistance extended well beyond the confines of a once mighty organization. It sparked a collective introspection among leaders, investors, and ordinary citizens alike, challenging the conventional notions of authority and success. The lessons of the past were repeated with a mix of grief and hope in academic lectures, books, and private chats over cups of steaming coffee, serving as a reminder that the journey toward a just society is an ever-changing narrative of trial, error, and, eventually, triumph. In the end, Anthony Caldwell's decision to confront the inequities of his day with a bold, unmistakable act of courage was not a rejection of the past, but rather a compelling call to honor the future. With every word he left behind, and every transformation he inspired in the minds of those who listened, he reiterated that true leadership is never about providing permission to be small, but rather about daring to dream big, even when the world tells you to give up. And in the process of tearing down what was, he laid the groundwork for what could be, urging future generations to establish a future in which empathy, equality, and genuine development are more than just ambitions, but living, breathing reality. Thus, the epic narrative of Halion Tech's final day and the exceptional man behind it serves as both an elegy and an anthem, a journey across the intricate landscapes of human ambition, social fairness, and the alluring force of transformation. It reminds us that the path to significant change is rarely easy, and that it is frequently paved with both pain and optimism. Every failure serves as a wake-up call to rise anew, and each wound contains the opportunity for healing. In the quiet interstices of corporate life and turbulent societal change, Anthony Caldwell's legacy endures, a timeless beacon urging us all to never lose sight of our innate capacity to rebuild, reinvent, and, ultimately, shine as our truest, most compassionate selves. Standing calmly amid the vivid memories of his journey, Anthony Caldwell found himself caught in a swirl of introspection and expectation. The Halientech closure not only caused a seismic shift in his personal life, but it also had far-reaching consequences. He had spent weeks after the dramatic conclusion analyzing every detail of the occurrence and its aftermath. As he went on an even more ambitious mission to rebuild the foundations of a society that valued true compassion and innovation, Anthony accepted his new role as visionary and mentor. The tranquil privacy of his retreat gave him plenty of time to go over every detail, message, and witness that had developed as a result of that tragic morning. He spent long hours by the window, studying the interplay of shadows and sunshine, which he saw as representing the unending cycle of endings and beginnings, a cycle that mirrored the existence of each human soul. In a series of late-night conversations with some of his most trusted advisors, Anthony began to sketch out plans for what would become known as the Renaissance Initiative, a game-changing project aimed at rebuilding not just a company, but an entire ecosystem where equity, transparency, and human dignity were the highest currencies. Over steaming cups of herbal tea in the early hours of the morning, he passionately shared his vision with people who had long felt abandoned by the inexorable march of standard corporate transformations. Each concept was thoroughly debated, and each vision was polished and enriched with insights gleaned from personal anecdotes and hard-earned wisdom. While some advisors feared that the shutdown would result in an irreparable collapse, Anthony saw it as a unique opportunity to create a community from the ground up. As word of the Renaissance Initiative spread around the city, surprising pockets of enthusiasm emerged. Locals in a dynamic area known for its diversified art and music scene convened spontaneous roundtable conversations on personal empowerment and community-led innovation. These meetings drew together not only ex-Halientech employees, but also young dreamers, struggling entrepreneurs, and established leaders who had been disillusioned by the callousness of huge corporations. During one such meeting, held in a small, converted loft with exposed brick walls and the echoes of soulful jazz in the background, a young activist named Maya openly declared, "We have been told for too long that we must comply to the outdated criteria of success. It is time to write our own story, one in which every voice matters and every soul is touched by the gentle hand of progress." Her comments, tinged with real emotion, struck a chord with those there, sparking a collective commitment to challenge the status quo. At the heart of this developing movement was a recognition that the old system had long been rigged to benefit the few while undermining the majority. Anthony's personal experiences had demonstrated that real efforts to innovate and inspire were frequently undercut by systematic impediments and a culture of privilege, which served to stifle anyone who dared to challenge power. Determined to create true change, Anthony began reaching out to various communities, from the tranquil suburbs to the bustling urban centers, and listening intently to their tales. He talked with artists whose creative work had been hampered by red tape, educators whose innovative ideas had been dismissed in boardrooms, and laborers whose efforts had gone unappreciated amidst the shining lights of corporate success. Each discussion acted as both a soothing salve and a call to action, encouraging him to shape the Renaissance Initiative into a movement capable of carrying the dreams of a varied nation. In one particularly remarkable case, Anthony attended a community meeting in a historically disenfranchised neighborhood. The location was a small community center with murals honoring local heroes and social hardships. Mrs. Williams, an elderly woman with soft eyes that suggested a life full of both challenges and achievements, told her story here. After decades of working in lowly jobs, she revealed how, despite her gift for organizing community activities and remarkable ability to bridge divisions, those in positions of power had always ignored and underestimated her. "I spent my life believing that my small acts of kindness and community service would eventually be recognized," she remarked, her voice shaking with emotion. "However, every time I reached out, the doors remained firmly closed in my face. But today, I see that we are no longer waiting for permission, we are demanding a seat at the table." Her comments echoed across the auditorium, not as a lament for defeat, but as a dynamic monument to the human spirit's tenacity. For Anthony, each story, like Mrs. Williams, was an important component in the mosaic of his new mission, to turn rejection into rejuvenation and despair into bold hope. As the weeks evolved into months and the Renaissance initiative took shape, Anthony discovered that each day presented new challenges, and surprising allies. A secretive gang of former IT inventors arose from the digital shadows, bonded by their shared disdain for corporate avarice. They huddled in hidden cafes and underground gatherings, poring over plans for decentralized networks, open-source platforms, and cooperative firms that promised to redistribute power and give equal opportunities for all. Among them was Raj, a bright software engineer who had often felt constrained by his previous job's standardized expectations. Raj had previously envisioned creating a digital utopia in which technology broke free from traditional constraints, and his ideals have now found fertile home within the Renaissance initiative. "We've been given an extraordinary opportunity to rewrite the rules," he exclaimed excitedly at one brainstorming session. "For too long, technology has been used to exclude rather than empower. Now, we can assure that no one falls behind." His determination shone across the room, inspiring others to share their own bold solutions and thoughts. Meanwhile, not every reaction to Anthony's bold decisions was positive. As the conventional elite began to see the Renaissance initiative as a significant danger to their comfortable status quo, various forms of opposition began to emerge. A hidden network of former board members and business strategists, determined to preserve the trademarks of an outdated system, began to spread misinformation and raise doubt about Anthony's techniques. Petitions were circulated warning of turmoil and financial collapse, claiming that an untested system would plunge towns into decadence and instability. However, with each vicious piece and ill-intentioned rumor, the underlying spirit of the endeavor became stronger. Anthony's unwavering determination, combined with his ability to rally genuine grassroots support, countered the toxic narratives with a mix of compassion, clear-eyed rationality, and a strong commitment to renewal. Crowds gathered for a public demonstration in a large city square that became the centerpiece of community activity, under a morning sky painted in hues of optimism and defiance. Thousands of people shouted in rhythmic harmony as Anthony mounted the stage to offer a stirring message. "Today, we stand together on the precipice of a new world," he declared, his gaze sweeping across a sea of resolute expressions. "Let us recover what has long been taken away from us, the right to imagine, create, and live in a society where each individual is valued for their natural worth. The challenge before us is enormous, but our collective courage is limitless." The square was alive with possibilities, a palpable force that carried echoes of dissent and emancipation through the city's brickwork and lanes. In that moment, the conflict was more than simply corporate or political, it was extremely personal, ringing in the hearts of everyone seeking dignity and justice. Back at his calm hideaway, Anthony began creating a manifesto, a book that not only outlines the Renaissance initiative's goals and ethics, but also chronicles his personal transformational path. This manifesto was more than just a plan for change, it was an invitation to everybody who had ever felt neglected or undervalued to join him in a movement that recognized all aspects of humanity. Its pages were loaded with observations, stories of adversity and triumph, and a firm confidence that those who dared to confront the status quo would inherit the future. Anthony carefully rewrote each paragraph until it reflected the clarity of his convictions and the intensity of his hopes. As the manifesto spread through community newsletters, digital forums, and local radio stations, it sparked discussions far beyond the original circle of activists. University halls were alive with discussions about leadership, ethics, and the transformative power of empathy. Renowned historians cited Anthony's theories alongside historical visionaries, and business thinkers used them to rethink what actual success meant. In informal gatherings at cafes and libraries, ordinary folks retraced his steps, learning lessons from his experiences that extended beyond the confines of business and into the common struggles of life itself. Teachers in high schools used his story to demonstrate how adversity, when addressed with ingenuity and authenticity, may transform into something truly beautiful. Nonetheless, the Renaissance initiative's journey has not been without challenges. The move from traditional organizational processes to a model based on shared values was fraught with practical and emotional challenges. As the corporate old guard began to unite against the rapid changes, the media focused on economic uncertainty. There were times when Anthony questioned whether the promise of such a massive endeavor could resist the strains of a global economy created by and for a very different time. Late-night study sessions included computations, meetings with financial strategists, and soul-searching over phone calls with trusted friends who reminded him of the necessity of sticking to one's vision in the face of adversity. Despite these difficulties, one constant remained: the unwavering notion that human potential could only develop when emancipated from the constraints of obsolete measures. In one especially difficult discussion with a panel of skeptical economists and financial regulators, Anthony carefully articulated his vision for a more compassionate economy, one in which community wealth and personal well-being were inexorably linked. "It is time," he remarked with calm enthusiasm, "to shift our focus from monetary gain to profound progress. Let us evaluate success not by transient figures on a ledger, but by the long-term influence our activities have on the lives of others around us. Our economy, like our society, must be founded on the ideals of equality, respect, and shared prosperity." His statements, while welcomed with cautious hope by some, sparked heated arguments and discussions that would change economic theories for years to come. As the Renaissance Initiative gained traction, a network of regional outposts was built throughout the country. Local committees at each outpost oversaw projects ranging from educational reform to sustainable urban development. Because the movement was decentralized, each community designed its own reforms to address its specific issues and strengths. A group of local visionaries repurposed an abandoned warehouse into a cutting-edge learning center in a small seaside town devastated by economic downturn and environmental challenges. Under the careful supervision of volunteer educators and tech-savvy mentors, children and adults alike learned skills that not only prepared them for a digital future, but also instilled in them a strong feeling of agency. These community centers became sanctuaries of inspiration and empowerment, silent testaments to the transformational power of a movement that refused to be constrained by the old world's boundaries. Throughout it all, Anthony kept an active presence, communicating with communities through passionate letters, live town hall meetings, and occasional visits to the places that inspired his metamorphosis. Each letter he wrote was imbued with raw emotion, recounting both victories and setbacks, the time when a discussion about equitable education turned into a tearful, jubilant declaration of solidarity, the time when a group of skeptics, previously entrenched in cynicism, were moved to volunteer at a community kitchen after hearing one of his stirring speeches. These events not only confirmed his primary belief in people's inherent goodness, but they also strengthened the collective link that served as the foundation of the Renaissance Initiative. In an unexpected twist that added to the movement's storyline, Anthony ran upon a long-lost acquaintance from his early days in business, Marcus, a former strong adversary whose career trajectory had veered significantly from his own. Marcus had always represented efficiency and profitability in a world dominated by bureaucracy and cold algorithms. Marcus felt an inner struggle rising inside him as he learned of the dramatic events that had transformed Anthony's life and the bold calls for change that were now resonating across the country. Marcus approached Anthony, unable to deny the gravitational pull of their common past and sincere desire for improvement. Their eventual reunion, which took place in a small, private cafe filled with memories of their early aspirations, was marked by a timid but hopeful debate about the potential of banding together for the greater good. Marcus, whose formerly unwavering dedication to traditional techniques had waned, was gradually drawn in by the Renaissance Initiative's principles and aims. "I've always admired efficiency," Marcus said after one of their lengthy discussions, "but what good is efficiency if it lacks compassion? Perhaps it is time for us to reimagine what leadership entails." Over time, his involvement lent a nuanced perspective to the initiative, as he began advocating for reforms that balanced pragmatism with ethical considerations, a fusion that promised to bridge the gap between old corporate paradigms and the new model of collaborative progress. The shift began to spread, reaching people in ways Anthony had never imagined. Art, which had always been a silent companion on his journey, grew into a lively representation of the movement's collective identity. Massive murals, public sculptures, and interactive works began to develop in the center of cities, each one a visual monument to the struggle, resilience, and transforming force of people working together for a common goal. One such installation, a towering sculpture made of recycled metal and glass, stood in central downtown as a symbol of renewal. Inscriptions on its base commemorated the many voices of individuals who had previously been hushed, while reflective surfaces reflected the ever-changing faces of a community committed to maintain its dignity. Local artists organized classes around the sculpture, utilizing it as both a muse and a monument, a reminder that beauty and togetherness frequently emerge from the convergence of various scars, including scars of hope. Even as the Renaissance initiative matured into a self-sustaining force for change, Anthony Barbera pursued his personal path. Amidst the conference halls, community gatherings, and heated arguments, he was drawn back to writing, this time with a raw, uncensored voice that belied his many honors. In a much-anticipated new literary masterpiece, he described every twist of his arduous path, interwoven with stories of grief, triumph, love, and redemption. His work was both a journal and a manifesto, destined to become a seminal document for those seeking to comprehend the complex interplay of culture, business, and the spirit. Each chapter, full with vivid descriptions and poignant insights, went beyond the bounds of corporate boardrooms, moving readers from all walks of life. The movement's ethos started to impact policy and governance. State legislators were inspired by the grassroots movement and launched proposals for sweeping reforms in employment equity, educational funding, and community-based economic development. Laws were proposed that would require diverse representation not only at the top level of organizations, but at all levels of decision-making. Public debates on these topics became increasingly heated, with communities demanding a more equitable division of resources and duties. Anthony's testimony before government committees, given with a mix of sincere vulnerability and steely conviction, served as a catalyst for numerous legislation revisions. "We must remember," he implored during one hearing, "that the measure of a society is found not in its wealth, but in its generosity, compassion, and unwavering commitment to justice." His words echoed beyond the walls of Parliament, inspiring a generation of new leaders who were ready to envision a future far removed from the inequities of the past. Over time, the Renaissance initiative grew into a vast network of social companies, educational institutions, and community centers, all linked by the common thread of empowerment. Annual festivals were organized to commemorate this newfound unity, vibrant fairs where local innovators, artists, and activists showcased projects ranging from renewable energy solutions to microfinance initiatives, each demonstrating a tangible testament to what could be accomplished when obstacles were overcome through collective will. One such event, conducted on a beautiful summer day in a renovated public park, brought families, activists, and businesses together in an explosion of color, sound, and pure, unadulterated joy. Music, poetry, food, and dance combined seamlessly to depict the story of resilience, transformation, and the unwavering quest of a better tomorrow. In these festivals, Haley Nteka's legacy and Anthony Caldwell's courageous decision transcended their beginnings. It became a symbol of optimism and a rallying cry for change, urging everyone to break down the boundaries that separated them and rebuild a world that embraced everyone's right to equality and creativity. The spirit of the movement permeated every corner through impromptu plays, heartfelt speeches, and impassioned dialogues under the open sky, reminding each soul that the journey toward a more just and vibrant society was a shared step-by-step process fraught with both challenges and endless possibilities. As the sun set below the horizon on one wonderful evening, a day marked by collective celebration and a renewed determination to a more compassionate future, Anthony peered out from a tiny balcony overlooking the city's pulsing energy below. The subtle murmur of conversations, the laughter of children playing in the streets, and the rhythmic beats of community musicians combined to create a symphony of hope. In that peaceful moment of reflection, he recognized that the closure of a single enterprise had triggered a rebirth that would last for decades. His decision, prompted by the sting of a few harsh words and softened by a determination to follow a more humane path, had grown into a movement that transcended limited bounds. It brought together boardrooms and community halls, tech innovators and grassroots activists, and an individual's dreams with the aspirations of a nation. When Anthony reflected on his own journey, from the sorrow of being dismissed to the empowerment of leading a transformative movement, he realized that every adversity served a purpose. Each instance of rejection had, in reality, laid the groundwork for a more comprehensive vision. And as he moved forward, spurred not by profit plaudits but by the modest winds of changed hearts, he believed that the seeds he had sowed would bloom into a future brimming with compassion, creativity, and the limitless potential of a united human spirit. In the grand scheme of history, Anthony Caldwell's Odyssey had come to symbolize the idea that leadership is a never-ending journey, one that demands the fortitude to defy traditions, the humility to learn from every failure, and the audacity to rebuild again amid the relics of an old order. The Renaissance initiative did not mark the end of an era, but rather the promise of a future in which every individual was a change agent, every challenge ignited the spark of innovation, and the collective spirit of humanity triumphed over the constraints of outdated systems. As these vibrant chapters of transformation continue to unfold, Anthony Caldwell's extended epic and the movement he so boldly shaped serve as a testament to the enduring truth that true progress is measured not by tangible assets alone, but by the warmth of community, the resilience of the human heart, and the unwavering belief that every single voice matters. And in that tapestry of dreams, woven together by countless stories of struggle and triumph, the legacy of one man's defiant act continues to inspire new generations to push boundaries, value diversity, and, most importantly, to believe that the future can be written with compassion, justice, and the bold strokes of visionary leadership.